Well, hey, welcome to the first episode of the Always About People show. My name is Chris Allen, and this is a long time coming. In many ways, a dream come true for me, as so much of my life has been spent trying to figure out ways to help people become all that they were made to be. And that's the topic of this show and of the shows to come. We are streaming live right now on both Facebook and YouTube. And we will be able to take your comments and hopefully be able to respond to those even in the moment. But thank you for tuning in. Again, as I mentioned, this is kind of a dream come true for me, as I've spent my life over the past 20 years in and out of different organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, church, and all of which trying to figure out ways of helping people to become all that they were made to be. And so, as I mentioned before, this show, the Always About People show, is about people because it's really always about people. And when we think about organizations, most people will spend most of their waking hours at work every day. And yet, how can we take work and help the place where people will spend more waking hours become a place that makes individuals better? Moms, better moms, dads, better brothers, sisters, spouses, better employees, better coaches, better bosses, better leaders. And that's what we're going to aim to do on this show. This first episode is going to be more theoretical in nature, but going forward, we're going to have interviews with great leaders across the country and across the globe. We're going to have conversations with leaders you may have not heard of who are doing incredible things with people. We want these future episodes to be highly practical in nature, to give you help as you lead people and as you figure out how to create an environment, even in a remote environment, that ties people to your culture, to a mission, to a great purpose, and ultimately improves their performance, their motivation, and their excitement and engagement in the workplace. You know, I think that's the big issue. And that's really the issue that I want to tackle even today. And it's this. If we're going to spend more waking hours in the workplace, why can't we create a place that actually makes each one of us better, that helps us grow, that helps us develop, that helps us become better for every role that we play? And yet, here's the fascinating thing. In today's culture, we've got such a divide. We've got conversations going on social media every day of people battling one another, people trying to trash one another and take one another down. And I hope that this show and this platform becomes a place where we lift up people and we find ways of encouraging people in this environment, because the data shows we're not doing very well. People are barely thriving. They're just barely surviving. And ultimately, in the pandemic that we've experienced over the past really year and a half, this has been detrimental to people, to workplaces, to our mental psyche, to our health, to our wellness. And I think we can do better. That's my thesis, and that's my belief, and that's my challenge to you. And so when you look at the data, people are all saying, gosh, this is the great resignation. People are leaving the workplace in droves. Well, I was on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website yesterday. I know, sounds really fun, doesn't it? But I was looking at the data of the quit rates over the last 20 years. And if you go back to 2000 and you look at the quit rates, it steadily climbed, and then the quit rate dropped when we went through the recession in 08, 09, and into 10. But then over the last 10 or so years, that quit rate has been steadily increasing. And during the pandemic, we saw a drop off in the quit rate as everybody just sort of held steady in their workplace. But then coming out of the pandemic, everybody is saying, gosh, we're now in this crazy great resignation. People are leaving the workplace in droves. And the reality is, statistically, that's not true. We are actually at the same place we would have been had the pandemic not even happened. The quit rate has been steadily increasing. And really, if you drew sort of a line on the graph, you would see that We're in the same place. And so my question is, what are we doing wrong? If this many people are trying to figure out, hey, where's the new place I can go? Where can I go next? What can I find that will at least engage me on a better level? Where can I be used? Where can I be developed? Where can I grow? And they're leaving their current workplaces to do that. My question is, instead of blaming people for that, how can we improve our workplaces that would create a place where people would be attracted and they would want to stay and they would grow and they would become the best version of themselves? And so I've been researching, I've been looking at data over the past few years to try and figure out what is it about our workplaces that is really not engaging people. And the data is pretty astounding. I mean, when you look at our workplaces, we are not doing well. So when you look at the state of the American workplace that Gallup published 4 years ago, again, 4 years ago, they said that a third of employees are engaged in their workplace, meaning 2/3 of people aren't even engaged. Less than half of employees even know what's expected of them at work, and 51% of employees are actively looking for a new job or watching for openings. Now, that was 4 years ago. So even 4 years ago, we saw, thanks to Gallup, that there was an issue going on in our workplaces where we were not engaging people and we weren't doing a great job at keeping people around because half of people were trying to figure out, hey, where can I go next? And so our response over the past few years has been to figure out, who can we blame? Hey, let's blame the millennials. Let's blame a generation of entitled human beings for the issues that we're seeing in the workplace. And I would just like to offer a different opinion. I don't think that it's just a generation that's to blame. I think we need to go back and look at the workplace. Really since the Industrial Revolution and really Taylorism, Frederick Winslow Taylor in the late 1800s, early 1900s came up with a scientific way of management, of managing people. And it was out of the Industrial Revolution. And he basically said, hey, we can scientifically design everyone's job. And then we can most efficiently align people with their strengths in a role. We tell them exactly what to do. We give them their function and they just stay on that assembly line. They do the exact same thing over and over and over again. And we'll create an efficient workplace. Well, it did create an efficient workplace, but it didn't engage people. It didn't develop people, and it didn't help people have a level of agency or autonomy in their work. I think the issue is that we've carried forward that management theory even into today, where we treat people more like machines than we treat them like actual people. And I think we're seeing that we now have a generation that grew up, let's call it the baby boomers into Gen X, that said, hey, I'm in a job for a job. But now we have a generation, this next generation, which would include the late Gen Xers. Some call them the Zennials. Some call them the Oregon Trail generation, into millennials and into Gen Z, that are now saying, I want more in the workplace. So let's look at some more data. In 2018, the Global Culture Report by O.C. Tanner said that 21% of employees say their organizations consider people a priority. Let me flip that for you. Close to 80% of people say that they're a part of an organization that does not consider me a priority. 56% feel a sense of belonging and inclusion at work, and only 40% say their organizations foster happiness both inside and outside of work. I mean, the truth is, these aren't great statistics. These stats would seem to back up the fact that we're not doing a great job in our workplaces at valuing people, at including them, at making them feel like their work is important. In many ways, it backs up the fact that we're treating people like machines. Like, hey, come and go. I'll just replace you. You're fully replaceable. And when we have that sort of belief system, that leads to a certain action where in our workplaces, we're not valuing people for what they can do. So the data continues. This year, the State of the Global Workplace report was put out by Gallup, and it claimed that globally, only 20% of employees are engaged in their work and workplace. Now, for the United States, that climbed to about 34%, up from 33% in 2017. So we've made a little bit of progress over the last 4 years in the United States, but globally, really not good. And then 32% of employees are not living their best lives. They're not thriving. And we know that really all the data is showing that wellness, holistic wellness, employee wellness that doesn't just factor on just a good job, but makes me a better person is what people are looking for. It's really getting at human motivation and human needs. So, more data from Microsoft this year. They did a study across 31,000 people using their Teams platform. The study was the Work Trend Index, and what they found was that 41% of the global workforce is likely to consider leaving their current employer within the next year. This number is even higher for Gen Z, but 46% are planning to make a major pivot or career transition, as if this was something new. And what I'd like to remind you is that Gallup identified that 4 years ago, saying that 56% of people were just sort of looking for somewhere else, and maybe they were on their work computer, but they were looking up other job opportunities. And I would just like to offer the question, like, why are people looking? Why are people so unhappy? Why do people not feel included? And how do we change this? So in 2017, Gallup put out a study on how millennials want to work and live. They followed it up later with more research showing that really it's not just millennials, but this is a shift in the workplace. This is a generational shift that's not just about millennials, but is about all people. In the past, people wanted a paycheck. They viewed work as just an opportunity to provide for their families, and they saw it as just a paycheck. It was about their satisfaction. It was about having a boss who could tell me what to do. It was about an annual review. Give me my annual review so that I can get a merit increase, so that I can get a bonus. Like our education systems, the workplace focused on weaknesses and trying to improve individuals' weaknesses. And it was just a job. It was a job because people saw the importance of a job to just provide for their families, to provide for the people that mattered most to them. But what's happened is we've seen a shift. And the future of the workplace, people are looking for a purpose, not just a paycheck. They want deep purpose in what they're doing. I want it to mean something. I want what I do every day to actually impact something more meaningful. It's no longer about my satisfaction. It's about my development. I want to grow. I want to become the best version of myself. I no longer just want a boss. I want a coach. I want somebody who will come alongside me, who will help me to discover myself to a greater context, or to understand more about who I am and how I'm wired, my personality. It's no longer about just an annual review. It's about ongoing conversations. I'd like to offer that the annual review never really worked. It won't work. The annual review was in many ways put in place to just substantiate or to give credence to merit increases and increases in salary. And yet the annual review for most people is kind of just a process that they go through, check the box type of thing. But we've got a next generation that's saying, I don't just want an annual review. Would you just talk to me? Have a conversation with me. Ongoing conversations are important. I've often thought that this would be funny if in a marriage you said, listen, spouse, we're going to sit down for our annual review. And I'm going to tell you all of the things that you're doing well and a few things that you need to improve on. And every fall in about November, we'll sit down for our annual marriage review. Well, that, I promise you, would not go over very well. And so neither does it in the workplace. This idea is that, like, people want to be talked to. When you're having constant conversations with people, when you're focused on the one-on-one relationship, it makes it a whole lot easier to have positive conversations and to also include areas where people can improve. It's much easier to give feedback to people when you have a relationship and there's an ongoing conversation versus just being sort of a one time a year. Hey, let's get together and let me tell you all the things you need to get better at. Nobody really likes that. So then instead of focusing on weaknesses, it's a focus on strengths. That we would look, and obviously this is from the Gallup organization. They have an assessment that they call now their Clifton Strengths, but it identifies the strengths within you. And what I would offer is there are a ton of different assessments out there, but the point would be, how do we utilize people's strengths, put them in seats where they can be utilized to the greatest extent possible, where they can help the team. I mean, that's what we do in sports. You'd put somebody in the best position where they can be successful. We should be doing the same thing in the workplace. And now no longer is it just about a job, but this is about life. For the first time in the workplace, we're seeing that people don't just view their job as a job. It's not 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever time frame you're there. This is about my life. And I want to be connected to a brand with purpose. I want to be connected to people. I want relationships. I want to feel like I'm a part of community. And I want to be associated with that brand. But I have to be proud of it. And if that brand is not helping me become the best version of myself, I'm going to find another organization or another place where I can become better. And really, what this ties back to is human motivation. I mean, if you'll just rewind the clock a little bit and think of the class, Psychology 101. You might not remember anything, but you might remember extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. Those things that motivate us from outside and the things that motivate us from internally. And I've got some friends in New York City. Their organization is called Vega Factor. They've done a bunch of research around intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. They've got a book called Prime to Perform. But Neil Doshi and Lindsay McGregor, they laid out this framework for motivation. And I'll just quickly take you through this because I'd love for you to assess where you are individually right now. But across the top, you'll see that the motivations of the work itself, your identity, values, and beliefs, those would be more intrinsic focused. And then the external forces are extrinsic motivation. And then down the left side, you see both the direct motives and the indirect motives. The direct motives of play, purpose, and potential. The definition of play would be if I asked you what motivates you to do what you're doing, and you said, I just love it because it's fun. I do it because I enjoy it. That would be play. Play is you do something for the enjoyment of it. You know, if you have a hobby, let's say it's playing golf, or for me, it's soccer. And like I do those things because I just enjoy them. Coaching, I just enjoy it. I feel like I'm coming to life when I do those activities. And when you think about work, most of us got into something for an enjoyment of that. But gradually over time, we lose that enjoyment because the pressures of the work itself take away the motivation that was once there. So that's play. The second direct motive would be purpose. And purpose is just, I'm doing something for the direct outcome of it, because it's actually creating something in me. So for a teacher, they might say, I'm motivated to teach because I'm passionate about educating the next generation. You know, for me, my work, the purpose in my work is I want to create workplaces that can ultimately help people thrive, become better, the best versions of themselves. And then the third direct motive is potential. That a secondary effect of what I'm doing, maybe a teacher says, I'm teaching because one day I want to be an administrator, or the potential to become a CEO someday, or a significant leader. I'm doing what I'm doing because I see potential in what I'm becoming. Those are the direct motives, and you'll see that those motives are closely related to the intrinsic motivation of the work itself, or your identity, beliefs, and values. But next are the indirect motives of emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia. And you'll see that those motivations move further away from the intrinsic motivation to extrinsic motivation, the things that motivate us from outside. So when you think about emotional pressure, why you do what you're doing, the definition of emotional pressure would be, well, I'm doing it because of FOMO. I have a deep fear of missing out, or I have a fear of somebody yelling at me, getting upset with me. I have a fear of potentially losing my job if I don't do this or that. I mean, there are a number of factors in our society, and this show will never get political, but there are a number of factors in our society that are creating emotional pressure on people around work, around life, around parenting, and everything else. And I think what's happening is that motivation, because it's extrinsic, is actually not as strong as the intrinsic motivations we just talked about, those direct motives. The second indirect motive is economic pressure. The definition would be, I'm doing something for the economic gain or to avoid the penalty. And I think this is most practical when we think about parenting. Most of us were taught that the way to get your kids to do something is to apply some form of reward to their behavior or a penalty if they don't do it. Like, hey, son, I ask you to take the trash out. Listen, if you don't take the trash out by 9 p.m., you will have to do 4 jobs tomorrow. Or, hey, kid, I need the front lawn mowed. I'll pay you $10. Now, those are parenting examples, but think about what's happening in our workplace culture right now. We're just pay them more to stay, give them a bonus, give them an incentive. And the truth is that economic motivation is becoming an extrinsic motive that is less impactful than the direct motives of play, purpose, and potential. The final motive that we showed here is inertia at the bottom. And the definition of inertia is when you ask somebody why they're doing what they're doing, and they look at you and they cannot come up with a reason. Inertia is simply, I'm doing it because I've always been doing it. It's my habit, it's my routine, and I know no other way. And so for many people, inertia becomes work. Like, I don't know, why are you still here? Well, it's what I've always done. It's the only thing that I know. I might have some emotional pressure and fear of what I might do, of some other industry. Like, what if I'm not successful? And so inertia keeps us in that place where we continue doing the same thing over and over and don't even know why. And I think that is the most detrimental of the motives. So if I show you this again, I want to tie it together for you. First of all, if you want your most creative, adaptive performance out of people, we need to tie back the direct motives of play, purpose, and potential. Maybe you're a leader and you're listening. Maybe you're a boss, a coach. Maybe you're a CEO and wondering how we can motivate our team more effectively. What I would say is, if you're not helping people find play, purpose, and potential in their work, you're missing the most effective motivation. If instead we're creating workplaces where we're adding to the emotional pressure, economic pressure, and even inertia of what people are experiencing, I can promise you we will not see the greatest levels of performance. Similarly, if I just need to get people to tactically perform, just do the job, kind of like the Industrial Revolution mentality, any of these motives will work. And the last thing that I'll share is that the further you get away from the work itself, out to inertia, the most detrimental those motives are. And so my tie back to the workplace would be this. I think some of the quit rate that we've seen increasing over the last 10 years is due to the fact that we're not motivating people correctly. And my challenge to you, whether you're just an employee who's struggling with motivation or you're a leader who's trying to lead people to be more motivated, how do we tie people back to enjoyment of their work? That doesn't mean having parties every day in the office. That means tie them back to the things that they enjoy doing. People who love math, who got into accounting, who have lost the passion for it, get that back. People who have been in teaching, who have lost the passion of teaching due to other regulatory issues, due to someone else doing lesson plans, due to the loss of autonomy and agency, all of those are taking away motivation. So I believe motivation is a significant cause of the issues we're seeing in the workplace, but I also believe it has to do with human needs. And so I want to bring you back to science class one more time. And this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow did make a couple adjustments to this triangle over the years. But what I want to show you more than anything, and I'll just camp out here for a couple minutes, is that at the foundational level of human need is physiological: air, water, food, shelter, sleep. Okay, got it. Safety needs is the next level, and you'll see there that it's defined as personal security and employment. I hope that that sinks in, because what this is showing is that employment for a long time has been seen as a second level need for each of us, for humans, for people. But we have higher level needs: the higher level need of love and belonging, of friendship and intimacy and family, and what I would call social support networks, the higher level of esteem, and then ultimately at the top, self-actualization. Well, what's interesting about this is, if for so long employment has been seen as only meeting a second level need, people have been meeting the other needs through different ways, through different means. So when you think about love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization, people have been going outside of the workplace to meet those needs. Places like their community, places like their families, places like the church, other organizations in our society. And what I would say is, now we live in an age where people aren't going to those organizations. Families are more broken than ever. We live in a time right now, at least over the last year and a half, where people haven't been going to organized events. Everything's virtual, and we've been losing the human connection. So where do people get love and belonging? Where do people grow in self-esteem? And where do they become the best versions of themselves? Well, I would offer that we have a next generation that's now saying, I want the workplace to meet those needs. I want the workplace to not just be a second level need meter, if I could say it that way, but I want my workplace to make me feel like I'm loved and I belong to something. I want community. I want my workplace to make me feel better about myself. And ultimately, I want the workplace to help me become the best version of myself. And if my workplace can do that, then I leave work each day becoming a better mom, dad, brother, sister, employee, coach, boss, leader. And that makes for better people in society. I think that also leads to attraction and retention in our workplaces. And so as I think about the challenge in our workplaces today, as I think about the challenge that many of us are experiencing, as I think about all the articles I'm reading around the Great Resignation and the increasing quit rates, this show, the Always About People show, was just put in place and started to have conversations about what's going to make people better, what's going to help me become the best version of myself. And so I would just like to challenge you that when we think about the workplace today, can we create workplace cultures where people are becoming the best versions of themselves, where people are motivated by play, purpose, potential, where people's needs for community, love and belonging, and self-esteem, and ultimately self-actualization are actually becoming true, or are happening in the workplace? And so over future conversations, obviously this is episode 1, but in future conversations, we want to get practical about how to build cultures like that, how to build cultures where people thrive, how to build cultures where people become the best versions of themselves. And I believe that if we can create cultures like that, people will be attracted to them and they will want to stay. So for those of you who have been watching live on Facebook and YouTube, I want you to stay tuned to future episodes. If you're on YouTube, hit that bell so you can be reminded for when these future episodes are coming. We'll be, again, including interviews. We'll be bringing different leaders from different sectors of society and also different industries. And I'm excited about the conversation about how we can make people better. Well, that's the first episode. And again, as I mentioned, it's a dream come true. Thanks for joining us on this first episode of the Always About People show. Look for future episodes and more practical insights on how we can help make one another better. Thanks for joining.